EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome in, Eagles fans. It's a Tuesday morning edition of Birds 365 along with John McMullen. I'm Zander, Krause. You're watching Birds 365. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Don't forget to hit the like button on your way in. We appreciate all your support in the chat box. Johnny Mac, another day, another cornerback is coming to Philadelphia. Cornerback Sean Stevens is on his way in, one of the tryout guys for rookie camp. So I'll get to you, get your first reaction on that and what is now seemingly a crowded cornerback room. I never thought we would say that last season or coming out of last season, but boy, they got a lot of bodies in that cornerback room. What's your first takeaway on Sean Stevens? And did you see anything from Sean Stevens that stuck out to you at rookie camp?
No. And again, I can't say enough. We're in there for 10 or 15 minutes.
Yeah,
so,
not much time.
And the cornerbacks are on the other side of the field, so to see the receivers up close. But unless you're really focusing in with the binoculars on the corners for some reason, you weren't going to get much intel on those guys. But I mean, I talk about tryout players every year. You want to sign at least one to sort of send the message of if you work hard, you do the right things. You're rewarded for it, and that's always a good message to send. Last year I brought up yesterday on the show Charleston Rambo.
Right.
You're talking 88, 89, 90th guy on the roster. So this is a long uphill climb. And really probably the upside is the practice squad for a player like this. But he's an older rookie, had some issues, family issues, family health issues. He had to walk away from the game for a little bit. Went to small schools. Now, that's always the thing. Penn State was interested in him. He's Joey Porter Jr.'s cousin. And I believe Purdue as well. So it's not like he didn't have, big time college talent, but issues with off the field issues with as far as money and grades factored into that. So it's not that he doesn't have talent. He performed very well at Michigan State's Pro Day from an athletic standpoint, went to Tiny Ferris State as a grad transfer, had a bunch of interceptions. So he was a borderline draftable player, and it's sort of that Pittsburgh, Philadelphia battling back and forth. He was scheduled to go to Pittsburgh's rookie camp after the Eagles, Andy Waddle.
Yeah, it's
and
like
Grossman. Back and forth, and the Eagles signed him.
They're like a mirror of the Eagles nowadays with Andy Waddle.
Yeah, I wouldn't get too hyped up about this or too worried about it or too excited about it, whatever you want to say. But they do have a lot of bodies at corner. And this is not going to be one of the more relevant bodies when it comes to playing time. But again, you always want to send that message that if you come in, if you work the right way, if you work hard, you'll get rewarded. And who knows where it can go from here. I remember last year I was talking to Nick Sirianni about these guys are only here for 2 days. How can they even open the coach's eyes? And he went on, as he typically does, he went on a bit of a tangent, and he said, just don't miss Adam Thielen. Because Adam was a rookie tryout player way back in the day, and slowly made his open eyes and slowly turned into at the height of his career, tremendous player, Pro Bowl level receiver. And that's what he said. Just don't miss Adam Thielen. But the reality is Adam Thielen's probably not there. So, but you never know.
I'm going to point out this chat because this is exactly where my mind is. Thanks to the La Familia for checking in. Slot corner and slot wide receiver. Those are the two spots on this roster I keep going to as well. Obviously, linebacker too. And we'll see what happens with CB1 and CB2 with James Bradberry, but a lot of cornerback bodies, John. Is somebody, and you bring in John Stevens. I know it's a depth piece. It's not, this isn't groundbreaking news or anything, but is someone going to be on the way out? Are they going to bring all these camp bodies? How many corners can they bring all the way through training camp?
Well, remember, you don't have the multiple cuts, so you can carry 90 essentially to the end, which is helpful from a, it's ironic. I think there's always unintended consequences back when there used to be levels of cuts and you go from way back for people that don't, it was 90 to 80, and then there was a second cut, and then there was the cut down to 53. Then they changed it to 90 to 75 and 75 to 3. Now you can carry everybody the entire time, which the unintended consequences of that are a crappy preseason football. Not that it was ever great, but you try to protect your starters,
right?
Meaningful players even more. And then the part that you never start cross training until too late in the process. I think that's the more important part of it, because you don't have to. So I look at Cooper DeJean, who was interesting because, a lot of teams project him to safety. The Eagles are looking at him as a cornerback, but obviously they don't need a second outside cornerback for this year, maybe long-term to replace Darius Slay. But you want to get Quinyon Mitchell into the other spot, and all of a sudden you're like, when are you going to start that cross training with Cooper DeJean? Well, probably not till late in the process of training camp, to be honest, because you're going to have so many bodies, you don't feel the need to do it. And then all of a sudden you're down to 53. And if the right injuries happen at the wrong time, maybe he's got to play safety. Maybe he's going to play nickel linebacker. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And we'll see how Vic Fangio does it. But I think you're going to see a lot of big nickel. And we'll see how quickly he gets involved in that cross training. As far as how many bodies they want to keep at corner, it starts with James Bradberry. How far are they going to go with this? He's obviously not going to be here. I don't care what they say.
Yeah, I think they're going to move on from Bradberry.
Well, but they don't have to, from the standpoint of they could wait it out and go to training camp and cross their fingers that there's an injury somewhere else, and that increases his value, and you get something back in a trade. So you can take it all the way up to the cut of 53 if you want.
Right.
There's nothing to prevent the Eagles from doing that. So that starts, how long are you going to carry that, try to say, hey, he's part of the process. It's not going to make James happy, so you got to factor that into it. There's real world human effects to that kind of strategy. It's not a video game. You're dealing with human beings. He knows he's out. How far do you want to take it? Now, he's a very good guy. He's very professional. So that probably works against him. And then you have guys like Zach McPherson, who've been here for a long time. Even Mario Goodrich, writing's probably on the wall for those guys as well. But you're not going to cut them. So, you have no issues. 90-man roster.
Yeah.
Carry as many as you want.
Yeah. So they're going to have a look at everybody. John, is it unrealistic for me to be thinking maybe they will go into this season and be fine to have Cooper DeJean in a backup role? Just because I'm thinking about the outside corners. Let's just say for a second they do move on from James Bradberry. You have Slay and you have Mitchell for your outside corners. You do have Avonte Maddox and Isaiah Rodgers back to play slot corner. You have CJ Gardner-Johnson and Reed Blankenship at safeties. Maybe they'll keep Cooper DeJean for outside corner and just keep him as a depth piece, get him acclimated to the NFL and not rush that process. That's not far-fetched, is it?
It's not far-fetched, but I do think they want him on the field because they really like him. So I think they're going to try to, as I said, and we'll see how this unfolds. But my guess is you're going to see a lot of big nickel, as what it's described, which is essentially three safeties with that third safety essentially playing that second linebacker spot. And I think that's going to be Cooper's role early in
So
the
big
season.
nickel means there's one linebacker on the field.
Yeah. Yeah. And that would be Covey in theory, if he's healthy.
Right.
And then you're very undersized. So that's part of it. But nobody, that's the modern NFL. And nobody has shown, not all that many people, especially early in the season, have shown the affinity for taking advantage of those types of situations by running the football. So the goal is to get a bunch of coverage people on the field in obvious passing situations. We're not talking about 3rd and 2, but if it's 3rd and 7 plus, you want as many coverage people on the field. I think that's going to be Cooper's role. I think that would have been Sidney Brown's role when he comes back had they not drafted Cooper. So they have a lot of options as far as that goes as well. In corner, I mean, Isaiah Rodgers, right now I project him outside again because they have a bunch of bodies now. And Avonte, until Avonte gets hurt, Tyler Hall they signed. As I mentioned, Zach McPherson, they moved inside. He'll be back. Mario Goodrich is an inside player. Stevens is probably going to be an inside player. They got a lot of bodies. So right now, I would project Isaiah Rodgers to be outside. And they have a lot of bodies outside with Kaylee Ringo. People are already forgetting about him. I think he's a big-time prospect. Eli Ricks, Josh Jobe, Isaiah Rodgers. They're going to cut NFL level corners that are going to be playing in this league somewhere else. That's how quickly it's gone from an issue to having pretty decent depth at cornerback.
Yeah, and I think Ringo and Ricks are probably the two, I don't want to call them blue chip, but the two younger guys that they probably have high hopes for. And then I guess you could put Jobe in there. I know Jobe was an undrafted free agent. I guess Ricks was too, right? Ricks was an undrafted free agent as well. Yeah.
If you want to project to 2025, where Slay may not be here, and then you have Mitchell and either DeJean or Kaylee Ringo as your starter at the other spot. I think that's the hope, and one of the two will hit. And I think that's the way the Eagles are approaching it. But they want Cooper on the field this year. They're not gonna just sit him outside corner and say that's it. We're gonna wait. Wouldn't be the worst thing in the world from your point earlier, but I don't think that's the plan. I think they want to find a role for him and get him on the field.
So what do you see for Avonte Maddox? I know you said Isaiah Rodgers outside, which kind of surprises me, just because everything I've read has Isaiah Rodgers as a great slot cornerback. And then they didn't originally they didn't have Avonte Maddox. Then they re-signed him back, and now you have depth at that part of the roster too. They got a lot of cornerbacks. So I guess it's going to be pick your poison on who you want to let go, especially if you said another teams are out there. I never thought I'd say this, especially after last season. Teams are out there waiting to see what the Eagles do with all the cornerbacks on the rosters because they might be waiting to pick one of them off.
Yeah, and they're going to, like I said, they're going to cut NFL level cornerbacks when they get down to 53. Unless you have a bunch of injuries, which you always hope is not. Rodgers is interesting because, people were so excited about him, and now they've forgotten about him because he's not as relevant with Quinyon here and Cooper. It's funny, you have two camps. The camp that says, oh, he's an outside corner because he played an outside corner in Indianapolis, but they had Kenny Moore, who's one of the best slot cornerbacks in football. So if he was going to get on the field, and he got on the field as a part-time player, it was going to be outside. He wasn't going to replace Kenny Moore. So the assumption is, oh, he only played because he played very few snaps in the slot in Indianapolis. So you have two camps, one that says, well, he only played outside, and one that says he's going to play inside. And the camp that says he's going to play inside, that has to do with his size. He's 5'10", he's 170 pounds. So he projects better inside from a body standpoint than he does outside, because you don't want him dealing with the Mike Evanses of the world, or
Right. That's a mismatch all
yeah,
day.
or the AJ Browns of the world, or the Johnny Wilsons of the world. We'll throw him in there. So that's why. But right now, because they have, again, with 90 people, they have Avonte Maddox, who's healthy, and we'll see how long that lasts. And they have Tyler Hall, who they signed from the Las Vegas Raiders, who's a natural slot corner. And they have Zach McPherson coming back, and they have Mario Goodrich coming back. So they have a bunch of bodies to rotate through the slot in training camp. And when does that cross training start? Rodgers is going to get cross training inside and outside. The question is, when does it start? I think they're going to start him outside. We'll see, because they have Ringo and Ricks. And, you know, we don't even talk about Josh Jobe, who isn't relevant as a cornerback. So from the standpoint of Ringo and Ricks lapped him last year, so that's not a good sign. But he's arguably their best special teams player. So do you just want to let him go? Maybe you have to.
Yeah, with this many bodies, like you said, you might have to.
Down the road, I'm not talking at the cut to 53, you might have to. So, you know, Ringo's a good special teams player. But if you're asking me who's going to be on the roster, the only guarantees, completely 100% ironclad guarantee, that's what I'm talking about, is going to be on the 53, barring injury. The only ones, Slay, Mitchell, DeJean, Ringo. Everybody else, even Avonte Maddox, there's a path that it doesn't work out for them.
So as many bodies as they've added.
100% when I say that.
Right.
Slay, Mitchell, DeJean, Ringo. That's it. And that includes Rodgers and Ricks and Maddox, because they have so many bodies. And if Maddox gets hurt, obviously, if Avonte's healthy, he's going to be there. He's too good of a player. We've already seen it. Eli Ricks, if he has a bad camp, they can cut him. Isaiah Rodgers, after a year off, if he has a bad camp, they can cut him. Josh Jobe, if everybody has a good camp, all he can do is play special teams. He's not going to help you. They could cut him. Zach McPherson, I would say, is more likely to be cut than be back, unfortunately. Great guy. Wish him best of luck. And guys like Mario Goodrich and Tyler Hall, they got a long way to go. Long way to go.
As many bodies as they have, there still is a lot of hope. I know Howie always says hope is not a strategy, but you need some of these guys to step up. These are not all proven players we're talking about. It's a lot of bodies, but they're not all proven players.
No, well, young players by definition aren't proven.
No, never.
The only proven players are Slay and Bradberry and Maddox.
And but for that reason, that's why, as much as I think they're going to move on from Bradberry, I think they will at least consider keeping him around, depending on how the others look.
He's not going to be here week one. He might be here through camp, but he's not going to be here week one. He can't help on special teams. You don't carry veteran corners who can't help on special teams as backups. Either he's a starter or he's gone, and he's not going to be a starter. So you can do the math.
Deep cornerback room for the Philadelphia Eagles all of a sudden. Maybe not deep with talent, some talent, but a lot of bodies, that's for sure. So we'll talk about all that. Coming up next on Birds 365 is Ed Kracz, John's co-patriot at SI.com, does great work there. Read all his work at SI, as well as John McMullen's. And then later on in hour number 2, Scott Grayson from Fox 29. So 2 good guest plans from you today. And then in our segment later with Johnny Mack, I want to talk about his article on Anias Smith, Eagles 5th-round draft pick this year. Or was he a 4th-round pick? He might have been a 4th-round pick.
He's 5th rounder.
5th round. He was 5th round, one of those 3 5th-round picks they got. So we'll talk about Anias Smith. But coming up next, Ed Kracz from SI.com joining us here on Birds 365. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Stay locked in, and we'll be back with Ed Kracz.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.
Field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
Champions on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
Heading down the shore. Have a ball once more.
Here, imaginations run wild and time stands still. Because here, you can find the best of the Jersey Shore, all on one 5-mile island. So leave the old you behind and get lost in the woods.
Wild, wild, wildwood day.
Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
Hi, I'm Jim Muehlbronner, Managing Partner at Delval Insurance Group. Give us a call. We're a local, knowledgeable agency, not an 800 number. Go Birds!
The greatest fans on earth. It's a bold statement, but would you expect anything less from Philadelphia? 58 years of heartache creates a toughness, a grit, a resolve not found in most. Sure, our prayers were answered, but now that we've had a taste, we're looking for more. Pondley Hockey, official partner of the Philadelphia Eagles. EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome back in, everybody. A Tuesday edition of Birds 365. Joined now by Ed Kracz from SI.com. Ed, welcome to the show, man.
Hey, guys. Thanks a lot for having me.
Edward, good to see you, buddy.
Johnny Mac.
We're talking cornerbacks to start because the big Sean Stevens news broke. He's going to be in. They have so many bodies at cornerback. Obviously, last season, things went in a downward trajectory pretty quickly. So understandable why they wanted to correct it. But when is it too much when you have that many bodies? You want to focus on maybe a group of them to try to get them prepared for the season. They got a whole boatload of cornerbacks at Kracz. What do you make of it?
Well, I would channel my inner Howie Roseman and say that's a good problem to have, John. But to be honest, I never heard of Sean Stevens until last night when they signed him away from what looked like a short ticket to the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I don't know. I mean, he's a 5'8" cornerback, small school guy.
Now that's interesting right away, Ed. Sorry to interrupt you, but this kid's so unknown because I did my research after it broke as well. And I saw he was at the Michigan State Pro Day, and there's some scouting stuff that he's 5'8.5", The Eagles listed him as 6 foot on their roster. It's like, which is it? That's a pretty big difference. That's how much little is known about this kid.
Yeah. I don't know. Listen, when you're 5'8", you're going to claim that half inch every time. So if he's 5'8" and a half,
like 4 inches.
Yeah. I guess we'll see on May 20th or 23rd, whenever they.
Now I got to pay attention. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, everybody uses a different tape measure, I guess. I don't know, but can the guy play? And like you said, there's so many bodies there now. And I heard you guys talking a little bit before I came on about, this overcrowding situation they have here at cornerback. And like I said, Howie would say that's a good problem to have. Nick Sirianni would say it's a good problem to have. They have a new cornerbacks coach, new DB coach, new safety coach. They have all new coaches back there, new DC, obviously, who, we still haven't talked to yet, by the way, Vic Fangio. And here we are almost in the middle of May. They hired him 4 months ago. And, we're on the field the other day for rookie minicamp looking for him, making sure that they actually did hire him, because we haven't seen hide or hair of the guy, him or Kellen Moore, since they hired him. Every other team has made the coordinators available, as far as I know. And for some reason, the Eagles just don't want to do that for us. So assuming Vic Fangio is the DC, he's going to have a situation at cornerback to sort out. And that is a good problem to have. It's a lot of guys. And you guys are saying, you have to assume Bradberry's gone, and you're probably right. They're not going to keep a veteran corner around. Are they really going to start a rookie corner in Quinyon Mitchell? When was the last time they started a rookie cornerback? I mean, we'll have to go back in the archives to find that answer out, I think. But that's a lot of trust to have in a rookie to start at corner. And I'm assuming it would be Quinyon, but Cooper DeJean is a very capable corner too, and maybe he gets thrown into the starting job. I mean, I think those two could battle it out if they get rid of Bradberry to start. They're just not going to give it to Quinyon Mitchell because he was the first-round pick. I think we could see a battle between two rookies to start at cornerback if they part with James Bradberry, and I think they eventually will.
Yeah, what a change it's been from just a year ago when cornerback was one of their, least deep parts of the roster, and all of a sudden now, as Johnny Mack pointed out, there's going to be teams waiting to see who the Eagles cut, because there's NFL-ready corners on this roster that will ultimately not make it to the final roster. But Ed, how do you project Cooper DeJean? I know you just mentioned he could be a battling for outside cornerback. A lot has been made of his versatility, safety, slot corner, but they really have depth in that whole back end. Do you think outside corner is where they're going to put him, or could they use him on the inside or safety?
Well, I mean, I think, the story is going to be written, this summer as far as where they're going to play him. He played corner at Iowa, and, I know that's kind of probably his strongest position. I know he can play those other spots, but I think it will depend on, how he acclimates at safety. And I heard John say use him as the big nickel packages, be that extra linebacker that they bring down. I mean, I guess they could go that direction as well. But I think they're going to put him at corner initially. And this is just going to be kind of a battle. It's going to be fun to watch this cornerback battle shape up as to who is going to start opposite Slay. Will it be Bradberry, DeJean, Mitchell, Keely Ringo, who, did some good things later in the season last year, struggled obviously, at the beginning of his rookie year, but got better. It's going to be fascinating to see, Zander, exactly where he settles. Once, camp gets rolling, OTA's coming up here soon. Maybe we'll see some different formations. I doubt it. They play these things pretty close to the vest. So that's going to be fun. Just like the right guard spot, we don't know. I mean, those are the two positions I think is right guard and corner. Who's going to start, who's going to make the team? I mean, they're pretty deep on the offensive line as well. They have a lot of bodies they can roll through there. So I think Howie's done a really nice job putting this roster together in terms of creating competition. And that's what you want, because that's what's going to make you better in the long run.
Yeah, just to wrap things up, and we'll get to the offensive line because that's interesting as well, that right guard spot. And I know you asked Nick about Mekhi Becton, but when it comes to Cooper, because I wrote about him and I looked it up, because I think there's this narrative he can't play outside corner. The Eagles think he can play outside corner.
I do too.
So he had 705 snaps at Iowa last year. It wasn't as high as it should have been because he got injured. 630 of them were at outside corner. He had, he had 28 snaps at the line of scrimmage, 23 in the slot, 23 more in the box, and 1 as a safety. So the move to safety is a complete projection. And the guy runs a 4.4 4.40. He's got a 38.5 vertical leap. His broad jump is over 10 feet. So he shows that explosion. He's an athlete. I think a lot of people, let's be honest, as Jeff McClain got in trouble for, will they allow a white guy to play cornerback in the NFL? This guy's an athlete. It's not like he's doing things and he's not out there and he can only play zone coverage. And he's got tremendous ball skills. I think he's an outside corner. But Darius Slay's still here. If you Ed, if you project to 2025, it's probably going to be Mitchell and DeJean, outside corner. But before then, you want to get him on the field, sort of like Cam Jurgens playing at right guard, but he's really a center. And that's where I think that's the easiest spot because they don't have linebackers. So make him that big nickel player. That would have been Sidney Brown's role if they didn't draft Cooper DeJean. That's how I think you get him on the field early.
Well, Cam Jurgens didn't get on the field early. He sat pretty much as a rookie. Yeah. He played, 25 snaps, if that, on offense. I'm not even sure it was that high. So, he sat as a rookie. Listen, if you can't earn your way onto the field, it'd be nice for him to get on the field. And I think he will get on the field. He's that good of a player. I would like to see him get trained at the position he's going to play, cornerback. Who's to say that Mitchell and DeJean aren't both starting this year? I know, that's far-fetched. But, Slay is an older player. Yeah. We've already talked to him about how long this season is and how hard it is on the body.
He missed a bunch of games with his knee last year.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, we could see 2 rookie corners, on the field at the same time at some point during this season. I would even argue to just kind of, even give Slay a few breaks during the game, even if he's healthy, just to kind of, prevent him from wearing down later in the season. Try to keep him as healthy and as fresh as you can during the first couple months. And if that means, rotating Brad or Mitchell or DeJean or Ringo, whoever it is, so be it. Because you're right. I think it helps players to get on the field. Cam Jurgens came out like gangbusters when he finally got on the field as the right guard and played well until he injured, I think it was a foot or something after the first month and spent a month on the IR. But he was playing well before he got hurt, I thought. And then he came back and he wasn't quite the same. But it'd be real beneficial for the Eagles if that's their plan in 2025 to put DeJean and Mitchell on the outside. Then, it would be nice to get both those guys some time at those spots this year.
Yeah, I agree with you, Ed. I think that's a good point. And Slay is 33 years old.
Yeah.
In the NFL world, that's an old man. So we'll see what they end up doing there. Ed, we talked obviously a lot about DeJean and Mitchell to start there, but I just want to give you a chance to comment on, we haven't talked to you since the NFL draft, what the Eagles did overall. Howie did a great job, I thought, from a decision-making perspective. Obviously can't grade the players just yet, but I thought he did nice work. I thought he read the board great. Again, another year of playing his cards right, added some draft picks next year. What'd you make of Howie's overall 2024 draft?
Players aside, it was exciting because the guy's always trading, right? They're on the clock. Next thing you know, trade comes in and we're in the media house like, oh my God, what now? And you're scrambling.
I said to Johnny Mac, it's got to be tough to cover this team.
It's awful. It's awful.
It's kind of fun and it makes it exciting, like I said, in the draft room. But it's difficult to keep track of, what picks are going, what are they getting back. And then, you try to write it down to go back and look at it and study it a little bit later. And then next thing you know, there's another deal. What do you make? 8 trades in that draft?
8. And by the way, Pelissero screwed something up and had him at 9, which would have been a record, but it turned out to be 8.
It was 8. And the best thing I liked about the draft was he got 3 picks for next year when the draft is supposed to be deeper. A lot of this was the fewest number of underclassmen that came out in the draft. I think the number was 58. And, reason for that is the NIL money. You're making a lot of money now to play football and any sport really in college. So what's the rush? Why rush out to the NFL if you're going to be making maybe less than what you made in college with the NILs? But next year it's supposed to be, more of an upperclassman heavy type draft. So you assume that the talent will be a little bit deeper to pick from. And, Howie landed 3 picks, a third, a fourth, and a fifth, which is really, to me, the best part of this draft, players aside. Like I said, you get a third round pick. That's value. That's probably a top 100 pick. They didn't have a fourth round pick going into next year because they traded that for DeAndre Swift last year in the draft. So now you have that back. And I think it's the same pick that they traded away initially to the Lions. They got that back in the trade with Detroit. So they have that and they have a fifth. So, that to me was terrific. Terrific job by Howie Roseman. And then, I like the pick of DeJean in the second round. I like trading up, and Howie admitted he kind of probably lost that trade based on the draft chart evaluator. He probably gave up a little more than he would have liked to get up to number 2.
Jeffrey Lurie's sitting right next to him, trying to egg it on.
Yeah, I don't want to go there, but that was a Jeffrey Lurie pick right there.
Yeah, probably so. I mean, when your boss is breathing down your neck because he wants Cooper DeJean, you're going to lose a trade to make that happen. And but I think it was a good pick. And Howie said afterward, Jeffrey said that it's very rare that you get 2 first-round players when you're picking in the 20s to start with. And that, to me, is what they got, is because DeJean's grade by many was a first-round pick. So they essentially got 2 first-round picks in the top 40, which is good work, again, by Howie. And then we'll see. We'll see what Jalix Hunt can become. Anias Smith, I think, can be of service to them. And by the way, I think he puts Britton Covey's job in jeopardy because Smith is going to be used as kind of a gadget guy. I think he's got a running back background, a receiver background, punt return. He can return kicks. It's going to be a battle there too. We're talking about these little battles on the roster, and that's going to be one as well, as the punt returner, who's going to be the kick returner. And I like Trevor Keegan an awful lot. I mean, we talked about right guard. Who's to say he doesn't come in and win that job over Matt Hennessy and Mekhi Becton if they move him to guard, and whoever else is there, Tyler Steen, kind of the forgotten guy a little bit. Who's to say?
Starter Tyler Steen. He's the leader in the clubhouse, said Kracz.
Well, I'm not ready to go there yet. I'm not going there.
Yeah.
I think Trevor Keegan could come in and win that job.
I like Keegan a lot.
Yeah, I like Keegan a lot too. He's a captain on a national championship team.
Sound like Martin Frank.
Michigan man, Martin Frank.
Michigan man, Martin Frank.
Yeah, but I do like him school aside, Martin Frank aside. I like Trevor Keegan a lot. Dylan McMahon, I think, these comparisons to Jason Kelsey are a little bit ridiculous at this point. I mean, he's the same size. He came at the same point in the draft as Jason, but come on, let's see what he can do on the field first before we start.
Well, I'm with you there. Lightning doesn't strike. Same thing with the Eagles going the international pathway program to get another Australian rugby player. Lightning ain't striking twice, but who knows? Same thing with Dylan McMahon. Maybe he turns into a decent player, but I'm with you there. Right guard, you asked Nick about Mekhi Becton. I think, and I put myself in this camp, so I'll blame myself as well. In my first thought when people floated that, I think our buddy Jeff Mosher was the first to float. It was like, come on, the guy's massive. Why are you going to put him at guard? But Lane Johnson's 6'6", Jordan Mailata is 6'8", Landon Dickerson is 6'6", Tyler Steen is 6'5". What the hell's the difference between 6'5" and 6'7" at this stage? If he can play, and that's the big question. Now I'm starting to think it's not so crazy. Mekhi Becton, if he wins the job, have a legitimate competition. And by the way, it's got to be Tyler Steen. It's got to be Keegan, Mekhi Becton, Matt Hennessy. You can't, Jeff Stoutland knows he'll whittle it down. I don't think he's going to give the job to Tyler Steen. I think it's going to be a legit competition, not like Cam Jurgens was last year, where Nick would say, he's not the starter, he's not the starter, he's not the starter. but nobody else got first-team reps.
Right.
I think somebody else is getting first-team reps. The question is who? Could it be Mekhi Becton?
Well, it could be a little premature to think he can switch to guard. I mean, that's a big transition to make from tackle to guard. You were probably there when I can't remember who described it to us, but
I was Andre Dillard.
It's like going from being on an island by yourself at tackle to all of a sudden
you were going to the bathroom. He would describe it as if you
being in a phone booth. Someone said it was like being in a phone booth, and if you don't remember what a phone booth was, anybody out there that they were pretty small. So that's kind of the comparison: is you're going from an island where you're all by yourself on this deserted island, 1-on-1 against somebody, to a phone booth where you're working elbow to elbow, surface blocking, double teaming, all these other different blocking setups that you have. It's not easy to do, and I don't know if Becton can do it. I mean, are they going to try to look at him as a guard? Is Jeff Stoutland going to kind of take him under his wing and try to teach him how to play it? Probably, but can Becton do it? I don't know. I think
Andre's description, Ed, was more colorful. His was, if your dominant hand is injured and you have to go to the bathroom, that's what it's like, if you get my point. His was more colorful.
Yeah. Andre was very philosophical. Unfortunately, he, that didn't translate onto the field. He's with the Packers now, kind of washed out in Tennessee. Nice kid, really nice kid. But just struggling to play. But good for him. Maybe he'll write a book someday, using some of that colorful, descriptive language that he's prone to. But it's a tough transition is what I'm saying for Becton. And, again, I keep coming back to Keegan. I mean, I just think that he could wedge his way. And I know Tyler Steen, I think the Eagles, I'm not sure I think they kind of like him as a swing guy, but maybe that's changed now if Becton can come in.
Becton's here now. I think they want Tyler Steen to win the job, but they want him to win the job.
Right.
But I do think they want him to seize that job. Kenny, I don't know.
I could see that now that they have Becton, because really I thought he was going to be your swing tackle backing up, but now I think Becton could be that guy. And, maybe Becton, he could get on the field. Lane Johnson hasn't really, been as healthy these past couple of years as you'd like to see. He's kind of in and out of games. He'll miss a game, but Becton can step in then, and who knows, maybe Becton will end up being Lane Johnson's replacement after a couple of years. I don't know. He's only 25, Mekhi Becton. Yeah. He's only here on a 1-year deal. He'd have to see the benefit to sticking around if he's eventually going to take over for Johnson. He may not want to. He may want to go on to another team and be a starter right away. But Becton's going to be a fun watch too. I mean, there's a lot of good stories with this camp that will eventually come our way, and Becton's one of them. How is he going to transition to guard? Is he going to be happy backing up Lane and Jordan? We'll see.
And that's probably my biggest concern about Becton to guard now that it's shifted. Originally, it was size, and I've kind of gotten over that, but he's got to learn to play tackle before he can play guard. So that's my biggest issue. And it's probably not going to happen, but I do think it's interesting, and we'll see how it unfolds. With the draft, Ed, most of Howie's decisions make sense, and I always say that, and that's good. The one you can kind of nitpick about is Jalix Hunt that early, and the Eagles have acknowledged this is essentially a project player. We talked about all the cornerbacks. I mean, let's get some bodies at linebacker, Howie. What are we doing here? I got Cooper DeJean, sorry. Although maybe he turns to DeJean now that he's in Philly. I have him playing nickel linebacker, big nickel, essentially, because they don't have any linebackers.
Well, they drafted Jeremiah Trotter, brought in Zach Baun, who they like a whole lot, signed Devin White. This is how they do it.
Baun's going to be an edge rusher. He's not going to be an off-ball linebacker. They
Oren Burks.
compared
They
him to
brought in Oren
Andrew
Burks too.
Oren
Oren
Burks.
Burks, right? Forgot about Oren Burks, who I think his job might be in jeopardy with the drafting of Jeremiah Trotter. But who knows? Again, if it'd be nice if we would have had some inkling of how Vic Fangio wants to operate with his scheme before going into the draft, so we can kind of put some pieces in place here. But the fact is, we just don't know what Fangio's thinking with some of these guys and how he likes to run things. I mean, we have his body of history we can look at, but is that going to be the same, that he's done with this team? I don't know. But yeah, I mean, listen, linebacker, this is the way they do it. They're never going to draft a linebacker with the first or second round. I don't think. I mean, they've had opportunities to do it. They just don't want to do it. They prefer to bring in guys from other positions or from other teams rather in free agency. And maybe draft a linebacker late, which is what they did with Jeremiah Trotter. Now, they tried a linebacker a couple years ago in the third round, Davion Taylor. Obviously didn't work out real well.
By the way, player.
I mean, they finally go linebacker in a premium pick, and they take a project player.
Yeah. So, they got bitten there, but I think they have enough at linebacker. I really do, to kind of figure this thing out. I think Trotter could end up getting on the field at some point. Who knows about Covey if he can stay healthy. But I think they have some depth that if he doesn't stay healthy, it's not like you're going to run Shaq Leonard out there after you sign him in week 11 or whenever it was.
Excited about Shaq Leonard.
Yeah, that was such a desperation move. And, again, it didn't help. And you want to bring guys in. I know they had good luck with Zach Cunningham. I thought they might bring him back. I think he's still out there.
Yeah,
but
he is.
I think they have enough. I really do. I mean, I think after you draft Trotter, you sign Burks and Bond and White, you mix them in there with VanSumeren and
I want to see Ben VanSumeren. That's where I am. I'm not nearly as high on the linebackers as you. I want to see Ben VanSumeren seize a job. I don't know if he can, but I do know he's athletic. We've talked to him a lot. He's got a good mentality. He's a hard worker.
Yeah.
He picks things up quickly. He's very raw when he got here, but you saw the improvement when he was forced to play a little bit at the end of the season. Smart guy, dedicated guy. I want to see him jump up because I don't have confidence in any of them.
Well, you mentioned lightning striking twice. I mean, they had lightning strike with TJ Edwards, an undrafted kid from the Big Ten, Wisconsin.
And they let him walk, and he didn't even get paid that much.
But he's a guy that came in and was just like VanSumeren in terms of the attitude and work ethic and wanting to get better and do well at your job. And sure enough, he comes in, Edwards, and gets better each year. Got better in coverage, got better with his instincts. Everything just kind of clicked with TJ. And maybe lightning will strike twice, and Ben VanSumeren will be there.
I will say the big difference. TJ was a big-time college player. Like he was, I think, was second in the Butkus Award voting, and he ran a 4.87. So that's what doomed him. Like Ben barely played in college because he was so raw, and he transferred from Michigan to Michigan State or vice versa.
Yeah, he had it right the first time. Michigan to Michigan State.
Yeah, but he's a great athlete. He's a great athlete. Like TJ had to overcome the knock that he was a terrible athlete. And he remade his body. That guy from day one to when he left, he completely remade his body. And I think he ran 4.87 once in his entire life. Like he had a bad day and everybody labels him, and he became this big time player. And he's still a good alt-ball linebacker in Chicago, which tells you in two different spots he was big. So I'm not going to go that far, but I do want Ben VanSumeren. I don't have confidence in these other guys. I think that Covey can play, but man, he can't even find cleats to wear, Ed. I can't count on that guy.
Well, so you're saying that lightning's not going to strike twice with Ben VanSumeren, I guess, compared to TJ Edwards. You're right. Edwards was a better prospect, but who knows? Maybe some VanSumeren can come in and do it. I don't know. I like Devin White. I think that, he's at a crossroads of his career. I think that if he wants to continue his career, and he knows this, he's going to have to come out and he's going to have to perform. Otherwise, he's on a one-year deal. If he doesn't do the kind of things that he wants to do, he's going to wash out, or he's going to end up going to another team for a one-year deal, making less. I mean, this is a big year for him. He knows it, and I think that tends to motivate a lot of guys. So if he stays healthy, I think Devin White could be kind of, one of the better free agent signings in this class. I know it's a big if, but I think, the motivation factor is going to be huge for him.
TJ Edwards, to me, is a reminder every time I think about it that Howie's not going to change his ways at linebacker. You take an undrafted guy, you build him up into a great linebacker in the league by every metric.
Yeah.
And then when the contract time comes, you let him walk for – it's not like he got paid, big bucks. He got paid decent contract, but $7 or $8 million a year from Chicago, and Howie lets him walk right out the door. Johnny Mancus, you always say, that's a guy you want to parade. You want to show, look at what
I would have took pride. Now, I always say about TJ – and he might have just wanted to go home.
It's that, I guess. Yeah.
Because he was a Bears fan growing up. He grew up just outside of Chicago. Maybe he wanted to play for the Bears, and the Eagles wanted to sign him. I don't know if that's the case. But, yeah, he's somebody I would have took pride in. I would have said, look what I found if I'm a GM. And it didn't work out. But, that's the biggest issue with the Eagles on paper. It remains all ball linebacker to me. But the 5th round picks, you talked about Trevor Keegan. Jeremiah Trotter Jr. has a path to playing time, at least because of the issues at all ball linebacker. And then Anias Smith was the first of the 3 5th round picks. Eagles might finally have that manufactured touch player they can't seem to find that other teams have. But are we putting too much? These are 5th round picks. I like them all. I see potential in them all, but maybe we got to pump the brakes a little bit. Maybe that's for a year or two down the road. 5th round picks. There's a reason they're 5th round picks, right?
Right. And, Johnny Walker, what was he, a 6th round pick? Another receiver. I mean, you have to pump the brakes. You have to develop these guys. That's where your coaches come in. And that's, that's going to be a process, I think. I mean, you're right. You hope maybe they can come in and contribute in some way. They're not going to come in and be superstars right out of the gate, obviously. But can they come in and contribute? Can they come in and learn the game kind of in baptism under fire while they're on the field instead of just sitting on the sideline and watching and studying in meetings? Can they translate onto the field and get some experience there? But just going back to the linebacker spot, John, would you sign Zach Cunningham? I mean, look at the cornerbacks. They're bringing in, everybody to play corner, and we have a glut of players at that position. Would you bring in Cunningham and add him to what they've already done at linebacker?
Yeah, I would have, but I think that is, if they didn't sign Devin White, I think Devin White took his spot. And if you're asking me, would I rather have Zach Cunningham than Devin White? Yes. Obviously, Devin White's more athletic. He's a bigger name. I get the people that think the light switch is going to go off, but he's played 5 years. I don't think it goes off. And the same thing I say with Paris Campbell as the 3rd receiver. He's played too long for the light switch to go off at this point. So I would rather have Zach Cunningham, but they sort of made their decision with Devin White. I don't even mind Oren Burks as the 3rd linebacker. I think that's a good role for him as the top backup. He's a good special teams player. I think that was a good signing. You draft Trot. That's a good developmental guy to pair with Ben VanSumeren. Maybe one of the 2 hits. You're looking for one of the 2. So I would rather have the player I can trust, and that's Zach Cunningham, rather than to me, how he's swinging for the fences. It's all about launch angle with Devin White, and he's probably going to strike out.
Well, I disagree. I think I'd rather have White based on the motivation factor that, maybe this lights a fire under him. So I'd take White. You know who I would sign, though, at linebacker to bring in, if you're talking about bringing in like a Sean Stevens at cornerback, I'd bring back Sean Bradley. You know, he was a good special teams player, well-liked in the locker room, still out there. I know he's coming off, I think it was an Achilles that he had.
Achilles, yeah.
So, that's not easy to do, although Brandon Graham handled it just fine in his 30s when he came back from his. So, to me, I'd bring in Sean Bradley and see what he can give you. See if he can't crack his way onto this roster. But I don't have any problem with them signing White over Cunningham. I would not bring Cunningham back at this point. I think you roll the dice with White. Maybe you sign Bradley, see if he can find a way onto this roster.
Ed Kracz from SI.com joining us. Make sure you follow Ed on Twitter at KratzE. Ed, real quick, I want to ask you on the offensive side of the ball, what you're thinking at slot wide receiver. Johnny Mack wrote a good article about Anias Smith on SI.com. I think he's a good prospect. I think he fits the slot mold, maybe better than some of the players they've had in the past, but it seems to be a wheel at that position, and they have a great 1 and 2, but they haven't been able to find their slot. What do you think goes on at that position, or who do you think wins that spot at that position?
Yeah, again, I mentioned Covey kind of being in trouble here. I would really like to see them see what Covey can give you in the slot. Anias Smith is, they're taking it slowly with him. He had the stress fracture that they discovered at the combine in early March, and they sent him home, so he didn't run. And maybe that was to the Eagles' benefit. Maybe had he run and he's shown speed, and maybe he was able to go through the drills, the 3-cone, all that other stuff, maybe he would have risen up into the earlier on the third day, maybe an early 4th rounder. He wouldn't have been there for Philly to take. So, maybe it's to their benefit that he didn't work out, but they're going to take it slowly with him. I think he's certainly a guy that can do it. His production wasn't really what you'd like to see at A&M. He does have that running back background. I think in his sophomore year, he had 49 carries, almost 300 yards, 4 rushing touchdowns. That's certainly intriguing. But, he had 7 different quarterbacks at Texas A&M. I mean, so that could be a reason for his production not being what you would like to see. But I think for this team, I think he'll be in the mix for the slot corner. I think Devontae Smith could be in the slot. I think they're going to run a couple guys through the slot, and bring in maybe, Paris Campbell or Devontae Parker, someone as your other receiver on the outside if you put Smith down there. I'm not sure both of those guys make this team, especially
is there a bigger clip on this team, Ed, from starter to backups than receiver? You go from AJ and Devontae down to Paris Campbell and Devontae Parker.
Well, it's hard to find, a trio.
No, it is. But I'd like to have a little more juice at wide receiver 3, and hopefully it could be Anias Smith. He did come back for his pro day, ran a 4.55, which is not good. But maybe the stress fracture was still, he's not practicing, so maybe it bothered him.
Yeah.
He looks faster than that on the film.
Yeah.
So we'll see how it shakes out. But I mean, maybe Johnny Wilson. Give me something. I need some.
Johnny Wilson's a pretty tall slot, 6'7". I mean, the thing I like about Johnny Wilson is he came out and talked about Harold Carmichael when he asked who he emulates his game after, being a 6'7" guy, and he said Harold Carmichael. I mean, Harold Carmichael last played in like 1982.
He probably just met Harold. Harold
at least Jalen Hurts would be able to see Johnny Wilson over a Mackay Becton, a 6'8" Mackay Becton playing guard.
True.
It's going to be a tough line of sight there, tough vision. But the slot still has to be sorted, but I think Anias Smith does fit well there. I think Devontae Smith can rotate in there, give him some slot reps, and maybe Britton Covey. I mean, again, he did some good things on the scout team last year, probably deserved an opportunity to play a little bit more at receiver.
I think he did. I think he's a damn good. I think people assuming Anias Smith can be the punt returner. They don't realize how good Britton Covey was last year as the punt returner.
14.4 yards a return for Britton Covey last year. Anias Smith, I think, 14.3 yards per punt return, 20 punt returns
there's a big
at A&M. last year. It was a huge difference, for sure. But I like the fact that Anias Smith said he came in and he looked at XFL tape, studied the kickoffs in the XFL, because that's what the NFL is going to go with, is these kickoffs. And that to me shows, and if it was on his own, good for him. That shows, ambitious, he's ready for it. He wants to learn it. He wants to do it. So there's things to like about all these players. When they brought all these players out to us, I was very impressed with, how
5 red stars. It was the mentality off season.
Yeah, they're all good guys. You just hope they can play at some point. Like you said, 5th rounders or 5th rounders for a reason. Can they play? I don't know, but they're certainly good guys. They're certainly going to be good guys in the locker room, but we'll see if they can develop.
Real quick, and I kept you too late. I apologize, Ed. Covey, I hate to think this, but he's so honest. Do you think that hurts him? Do you think the Eagles want him to shut up?
I hope not.
I hope not either. But
I hope they let people be people and express themselves and not have to kind of put a lid on their personalities. I don't think that's a very good culture to have at all. So I'm going to say no, but maybe that's more wishful thinking, because I think you should just let people be themselves. And Britton's, like you said, he's a good guy to talk to. He's very honest. He'll tell it like it is. And he's very popular in the clubhouse.
Yeah.
You talk to other players in that locker room. They all like him, because of his honesty.
Not to like.
Yeah. So I would hope that that's not what the Eagles are thinking is, Covey tells the truth too often, or he speaks out too much. Or
I hate to think that way, but
I'm going to say
in between a bunch of players. I guess everything gets, goes into consideration.
Like if you're AJ, you can get away with it. You can say whatever the hell you want, and they'll deal with it. But if you're the back end, I don't know. Maybe I'm too conspiracy theorist.
Yeah, I don't like it. I hope that's not it. That's a bad culture if they're talking to him about.
That's a good point. Listen, Howie, that's a bad culture if you're thinking that way, because I think Britton Covey was the best punt returner in football last season, and people that think you can replace that, it's going to be a while.
Yeah, that's the other seemingly deep part of this roster now. There's all of a sudden a bunch of guys that can return. I guess after they change the kickoff rules, they go and get a bunch of guys. But, Ed, we appreciate you joining the show, man. Thank you for sticking on for a while. Make sure everybody reads Ed's work at si.com and follow him on Twitter at Kracz. Thanks, Ed, for joining the show.
Yep. Thanks, guys. See ya.
Thanks, bud.
There's Ed Kracz joining us from si.com, John's co-patriot. Good stuff from Ed Kracz there. Me and John will come back. We'll kick around a little bit of the wide receiver 3 talk. Johnny Mack wrote a nice article on SI about Anias Smith. I know they're taking it slow with him after the injury, but Johnny Mack, he's that manufactured touch guy, which I know you're very opinionated on. So we'll come back and we'll kick that around. Coming up later in hour number 2, Scott Grayson from Fox 29. So good stuff planned in hour number 2. Make sure you guys like the show, as it's the best thing you can do to help us grow. Trying to get to 100 likes during the live show. How close are we? If you guys can alert me of that, let's get to 100 likes during the live show. Plenty watching, over 750 across JAKIB platforms and almost 400 on YouTube. So good stuff from all of our viewers today. We appreciate it. Stick around. We'll be back to talk about wide receiver 3 and then Scotty Grayson coming up in about 15 minutes.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.
Is the best vacation one that you find, or one you get lost in? One that takes you to new heights, or reminds you to go with the flow? To get your feet wet and your wheels spinning? One that lets you find your own rhythm, or get carried away? Find the best of yourself. Get lost in the woods. Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
Go passionately. Go fearlessly. Go confidently.
Go Birds!
Go confidently towards your goals with First Trust, Philly's hometown bank for nearly 90 years and the official bank of the Philadelphia Eagles. We're focused on getting you over the goal line. So go with conviction, go with trust, and go forward with us by your side. First Trust Bank, the official bank of Philadelphia Dreams. Oh, and go Birds.
Listen, if we even think you owe us money, you won't know what hit you. We'll put liens on everything you own. Raid your bank accounts, retirement fund, pension. You'll open up your paycheck and cry because we'll already have the money. We'll haul you into federal court and you might even go to jail. Hey, it's our job.
Don't fight the IRS alone. The Tax Doctor is here to help you negotiate your tax bill and reduce your stress. Our experts will fight for you using IRS guidelines to stop any IRS actions like bank levies or wage garnishments. Plus, eliminate penalties and interest and reduce your past tax bill so you pay the IRS less. Help is here to deal with the IRS to reduce your stress. If you owe $10,000 or more in back taxes, do not call the IRS alone. Call a tax doctor now for a tax emergency analysis.
I'd have my mom call the number on the screen. You come see me alone. We'll work it out.
EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome back in, everybody. A Tuesday edition of Birds 365. May 7th already. The offseason's moving right along. The draft is officially in the rearview mirror. Johnny Mac, let's talk some offense. We started the show off talking defense, talking corners, talking secondary. This offense, a lot of talent on this offense. There are, as you said, there's a cliff from wide receiver 1 and 2 to wide receiver 3. But what do you think of Anias Smith? What do you think of that slot wide receiver? Before I get your reporter take on it, I'd like to hear your opinion on what way you would go or how you would like to fill that role. I know we talk about the speed guy with Quez Watkins, and you're not a huge fan of the manufactured touch nature of Anias Smith, but what's your opinion on wide receiver 3? What way should they look to go at that slot wide receiver?
Well, I think that's a misnomer. I don't dislike manufactured touch players. I've seen no evidence that the Eagles can take advantage of that type of player. Again, some of the most exciting players I've ever covered are manufactured touch guys. But there's only certain coaches that utilize them correctly. And you have to be very disciplined to do it because you have to keep going back to it. And the far easier way to get somebody open playing receivers, just run routes. And that's what most coaches default to. And the question is, I always bring up Cordero Patterson. He's one of the best football players I've ever been around. I had this argument with Jody back in the day. He called him a bust. I'm like, that's the best kick returner that ever lived. And he's he made an all-decade team. He is so explosive with the football in his hand. He started as a receiver. He turned into a running back, but he was in situations like if Kyle Shanahan had that guy, look out. He would have been Deebo Samuel before Deebo Samuel.
Yeah, he recently had a good stint with Atlanta. I think he might be with the Steelers now, no?
Yeah, and he's, mid-30s now.
Yeah,
that's
he's
how
old
long
player,
he's been. That's how long he's been around. Just unbelievable player. And then I go back to Percy Harvin. For people that remember Percy Harvin, look up the YouTube clips on Percy Harvin.
I remember Percy Harvin.
That guy was just so explosive and so dynamic. And again, if he was in a better situation, I think you'd be talking about him in almost legendary status. Not a lot of coaches use those types of players consistently. And I would say you might script up the first 15 and you might get Anias Smith a jet sweep and it might look good. And And then you get in the guts of the game and you never go back to it because you're not disciplined enough. And all of a sudden he's just running routes and he's not ready to do that. And he becomes ineffective or obviously on this particular team, you're not going to be talking about a lot of traffic from the standpoint of volume catching the football because of the talent ahead of them. And then it becomes forgotten in the offense. Can he run that route tree? Now, I will say that the Eagles think he can. And I know Anias personally takes that as a little bit of a chip on his shoulder when people call him a guy who he got to manufacture touches for. But to me, it's like, all right, are we going to play this game and pretend he's not a manufactured touch player? Then I think you guarantee he's a failure. If you don't want to play into it, if you consider it an insult, then again, what are we doing here?
Let me go to James Carver here, one of our great watchers. James, we appreciate your contributions as always. He's a football guy, James, and he is down in Texas. I believe he's down in Texas. So he said he watches Anias a lot, and he doesn't think he's a manufactured touch type of player. I think where the nuance comes, though, is when you play on an offense with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith and Jalen Hurts and Saquon Barkley, you almost have to be a manufactured touch player. Like, you're not going to get touches if they're not creating manufacturing touches for you. There's just too much talent. There's too many players on offense. So that from that point, I think it's debatable on whether he will be a manufactured touch player, or maybe he'll just be a regular slot type of player. But James, we do appreciate the super chat. Thank you for dropping that in. So I'll make sure to always read any super chat.
One thing, that first of all, I'll disagree with the comment from this perspective. A lot of people have pointed out with Cooper that, versatility is often a negative from the standpoint. Like, Cooper played outside corner at Iowa. Cooper is an outside cornerback. A lot of people aren't talking about him as an outside corner because they think he has the versatility to move inside. They think he has the versatility to play the slot. Sometimes being labeled a versatile player is a negative because you don't get to focus on, jack of all trades, master of none, so to speak. And you don't get to focus in. Now, some people can handle it. Here, I always bring up Malcolm Jenkins. Josh Metellus is one of my favorite players in the NFL, plays all over the place. And that's the reason he's one of my favorite players, because I find players like that amazing to be able to handle so many different jobs and different situations. And a lot of people, and I always bring up Minkah Fitzpatrick. He's a great player. The Dolphins wanted to turn him into Malcolm Jenkins, and he didn't want to do it. He was like, I don't want all that responsibility. I want to play safety and be an all-pro. And to his credit, he played safety, and he's an all-pro. But a lot of people don't want to take that on. As far as Anias, look, don't blame me. Blame the scouts. You can go on, the media guys, Ian Cummings, Dane Brugler, manufacture touch. I blame them. Blame the NFL scouts. I can say I threw it out, and again, the belief that he can run the whole route. I don't get this mentality. If you look at good route runners, all right, it starts with Justin Jefferson. Watch that guy run routes. Devontae Smith here. Watch Devontae run routes. Those
Stephon
guys,
Diggs, one of my favorites.
Stephon Diggs is one of the best. Adam Thielen, one of the best, who I brought up earlier. Those are high level route runners, and it's getting better because all college does is produce wide receivers. It seems now, and there's always a bunch of good ones. And more guys hit the ground running. There was a lull there where guys would come into this league as just terrible route runners, and it's getting better and better and better. But if you're just going to line up Anias Smith and say, run the route tree from the slot, you're doing that kid a disservice. So I don't know. I can't control people who think that's an insult. I want him on a jet. What do you think a bubble screen is? That's a manufactured touch. It's not an insult. It's what it is. So, I mean, you got to get past that and take advantage of what a player does well.
John, you and Jody
coaches can't do that. Sorry.
You and Jody used to debate all the time Quez Watkins, and Jody hated Quez Watkins, and I actually fell into the Jody. I understood your logic on the conversation.
Well, it's not even my logic. It's Nick Sirianni. So,
well, is that the right logic? If it was you right now and you're Nick Sirianni, do you value a guy like Anias Smith that can get open, that can play a more traditional slot type of role? Let's just assume he can for a minute. Or do you think they're going to go back and sign John Ross and say, go run a 4-2 up the field so we can open it up for AJ and Devontae?
Well, it depends what you're trying to accomplish. What I don't want Quez Watkins because I don't think he's a good player. But when you don't have a good slot receiver, whether there's a bunch of ways you can go about it. You can use a tight end as a flex receiver, who's essentially a slot receiver. You can go bigger, you can go smaller, you can go Julian Edelman. Which is, I think, what people look at and say, all right, that's a slot receiver. And then you want somebody who's got short area quickness who can win on option routes. There's a whole lot of ways you can go about it. But the key is, all right, if Quez Watkins is going to be your slot receiver most of the time, you're not going to rely on option routes because he can't do it. What he can do is stretch the field. So again, it's taking advantage of what players you do have. In the case of Anias, if he gets out there, and again, he's a 5th round pick, and I know everybody's great. We're talking about Anias Smith being the slot receiver. Think about the 5th round with the Eagles. Jeremiah Trotter's got a path to playing time. Trevor Keegan, Ed Kracz has got him pushing for right guard. Look, I'm going to be honest.
All these 5th round guys, the contributors.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest with everybody. It's very unlikely any of those 3 players have a major role on the Philadelphia Eagles this season. And there's a reason for that. And there's got to be further development. But I'm trying to, if I have Anias Smith, I'm trying to take advantage of what he does well and his running back history. He's even last year, there's a few times they put him in the backfield. He can actually run the football from the backfield. He can be a better bubble screen player. He can be a jet sweep guy, and he can win from the slot. Am I going to turn him into Julian Edelman? Why? Why would I do that? If you're doing that, you're guaranteeing the guy's not going to reach his ceiling as a player. So if you find it an insult to call him a manufactured touch player, he's going to be a failure if you're not going to take advantage of what he does well.
Coming up next on Birds 365 is Scott Grayson. We'll get to Scott real quick, but John, I do want to touch James Carver. Dropped us another super chat. Where Welker and Amendola manufactured touch players, that was exactly what scouts labeled both coming from TTU. Anias ran very few screens. I think there is a lot of nuance, though, when you're talking about, as John Mack pointed out, you got to know how to use these guys, or else it's all for naught. So we'll get to
we're comparing Wes Welker to Anias Smith because, and I don't know who he's talking to or what he's talking about, but good luck. Good luck. Good luck.
I think he's talking about the characteristics of the player.
Julian Edelman was a quarterback. All right. What does that matter? He turned into a guy who dominated from the slot as an option route runner. If you think Anias Smith can turn into Wes Welker, have at it. You're not taking advantage of what he does well.
Lofty expectations maybe for Anias Smith. Let's get to a commercial break. We'll have Scott Grayson from Fox 29 on the other side. We'll break it all down with Scott. We'll get his thoughts on the draft, the guard battle, the linebacker position, the cornerback position, and all that and more. Coming up next on Birds 365.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.
Field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
Champions on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
Heading down the shore. Have a ball once more.
Here, imaginations run wild and time stands still. Because here, you can find the best of the Jersey Shore, all on one 5-mile island. So leave the old you behind and get lost in the woods.
Wild, wild, wildwood day.
Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
Hi, I'm Jim Muehlbronner, Managing Partner at Delval Insurance Group. Give us a call. We're a local, knowledgeable agency, not an 800 number. Go Birds!
The greatest fans on earth. It's a bold statement, but would you expect anything less from Philadelphia? 58 years of heartache creates a toughness, a grit, a resolve not found in most. Sure, our prayers were answered, but now that we've had a taste, we're looking for more. Pondley Hockey, official partner of the Philadelphia Eagles.
EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome back in, everybody, to Tuesday's edition of Birds 365. We are joined now by Scott Grayson from Fox 29. Make sure you follow Scott on Twitter at @SGrayson Fox 29. Scott, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you, Zander. How you guys doing today?
Doing well. Scott, where are you? What are you doing? Give us, paint us the picture.
Running a bunch of errands, and I didn't quite make it home in time. So
that's fine.
We'll just do it live from the car.
We'll do it live. We'll Bill O'Reilly it. We'll do it live without the curses. You're nothing to curse about with the Eagles draft, right? We got 5th round picks starting here, Scott. Everybody's getting mad at me for questioning 5th round picks.
No, I thought Howie had a great draft. I mean, not only did he get 2 of what many people believe to be the top corners. But I thought he addressed some needs and then also banked some draft picks for next year, which is going to be significant as you look forward. So I just think, to me, it was a very good job by Howie. Are there still some holes that need to be filled or some question marks? Absolutely. Every team has them. But I thought he did very well. I was very pleased with Howie's draft.
Yeah, and it starts at the top, as you mentioned, with Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper, DeJean. To get 2 players like that, and the Eagles are telling the truth, by the way. They had Cooper DeJean as a first round level player, as a lot of people did. Had some issues with the leg injury. But to get those two players at a position of need coming off last season seemed like a plan. Was it a plan, or was it just the way the board fell? Because we know this team, Scott. We've been around this team for a long time. And this was the deepest offensive tackle draft in the history of mankind. And we're all looking at the Eagles and Howie Roseman and their foundational philosophy. And they went 0 for 24 when it came to offensive linemen in the first 2 days. So through round 3, and Howie even admitted, if you would have guessed that, I'd be shocked as the GM of the Eagles. So is this sort of good? Just, hey, the board fell this way, let's take advantage of it, versus we got to fix cornerback?
I think fixed cornerback was clearly the priority. And to me, so was it the plan? I think the plan was to go with the corner in the first round. I think when Cooper fell to them in the second round, they said, we got to take this guy too. And you can see the foundation built there, and they can really lock up, that position going forward in the future. If these guys, and it's the if, pan out, of course, you worry about projecting too far into the future, and these guys have to step up and play. But they also have a core group of younger players back there as well from last year, Keely Ringo, those kind of guys. So they definitely have some youth at that position now. I agree with you, John. I mean, if you would have told me that they would not take an offensive lineman in those first few rounds, I would have been shocked, because you're right. That is the philosophy. That seems to be the template, the time that they try to follow. So to me, I was a little surprised by that, but I think it's the way the board fell and how he's saying, and I wonder how much input he had from, Vic Fangio, as well as all the scouts they have there to say, we cannot pass up on this guy. He's there. We got to take, Cooper DeJean. And I just believe the way the board fell is what dictated what they did this year, which I don't know. I would say that's a little bit of a change in philosophy with Howie over the years. He used to seem like he was pretty ingrained in what he wanted to do. And here it seemed like they really kind of let the board tell them what they should do.
Yeah, maybe some input from Jeffrey Lurie as well for anybody that watched the unscripted. He was loving the Cooper DeJean trade up in the pick. But Scott, all of a sudden, this defensive back room has become very deep. You mentioned guys like Keely Ringo, Eli Ricks is back there. Obviously, the two new picks. You got Sidney Brown, Reed Blankenship, C.J. Gardner-Johnson. Whole litany of players now back there. Maybe don't all pan out to be great players, but how do you see it shaking out? Do you think Cooper DeJean is a year one starter? I think maybe that means you're moving on from James Bradberry at the very least. Yeah.
Yeah. I tell you what, I would love to know how uncomfortable James Bradberry may have been watching this draft unfold. Yeah. It's obvious they're going to put pressure on him to perform. And if he doesn't perform, they've got guys waiting in the wings who they would be more than happy to get some experience, face some live bullets and get all that going. I think they want Bradberry and his veteran experience to succeed and excel. I think Vic Fangio wants him to excel. I think, everybody's looking at that. And we've talked about this on this show before. I know we have, John, about it was a bad year. It was a bad ending. And he can bounce back. He still has the ability to bounce back. And I'm pushing the Eagles to see that. I would like to see that. Does he bounce back? And if not, man, there's youth ready to go, and there's guys here ready to go and push those guys. And I think even to an extent, Slay knows that his time is winding down, and they're starting to, bring in his replacement as well. So, time is running short for those older guys, and these younger players are going to push them. How it's going to shake out, how the rotation's going to go, I think they want to begin. Sorry about that. They want to begin with these veteran guys first and give them obviously the opportunity. You got to start Slay. I would like to see Bradberry have the starting spot first and lose it if these guys push him out of the way. So, but what they will do, there's a lot of time to figure that out.
Yeah.
Scott, I would like that as well, because I've said I'm a big James Bradberry guy. I know he had a terrible year, but I probably told you, and I say it on the show all the time, I think with Vic Fangio using him correctly, I think he'll have a bounce back year. I also think that's not possible now that they drafted Quinyon Mitchell. I think in a different era, maybe you could be patient. But in this society we live in now, they picked him 22nd overall. He's got to start. And if James Bradberry is not going to be a starter, he can't be a backup because he's not going to play special teams, yada, yada, yada. So I think his fate is already set. And unfortunately, now the Eagles may go even into training camp, hoping there's an injury somewhere else. Maybe somebody gets desperate, trade something for him. But I don't think there's any way James Bradberry's on this team week 1. Do you think the Eagles could be patient and disciplined enough and say, all right, let's let Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean sit and learn?
I guess the way I see it playing out, John, is I'm not expecting them to get rid of Bradberry quickly. I expect that they'll go. My thought would be that they would go into camp and let Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean really try to push Bradberry out of the way. And that's how I expect it to go. By week 1, I agree with you. You draft a guy that high, he's got to play. This day and age in the NFL, first-round picks have to play. So I expect that the Eagles are going to try to maybe do some of that. Let him push Bradberry out of the way and ultimately have the job week 1, which I think would be the case. You're right about injuries. I mean, they have a valuable veteran, valuable maybe overstating it right now coming off the year he had, but a veteran corner that if there is an injury somewhere on someone who thinks they might be a contender or have a chance, that would make a call and say, what would you be willing to give Bradberry for? And to me, that's why you hold on to him. You don't gain anything. We've talked about this. I mean, there's no reason really to let him go and walk now or even after June 1st. You're going to face the salary cap hit that you got. I hold on to him. He's a commodity right now. He's obviously a veteran who can, I'm sure he's not going to be looking to teach these younger guys to take his job, but you can watch him. You can learn some things from watching him work that maybe, these younger players can take from that. But I agree with you, John, that you got to start a first-round pick. Otherwise, what did you get him for?
Yeah, and then if they go into the season with Bradberry, Slay, Blankenship because Sidney Brown's hurt, and then it's basically the same secondary plus CJ GJ. So I don't think that's enough when you have.
Well, that's still an upgrade, by the way.
That's still an upgrade, but is that enough to move the needle to what we're looking to move the needle to? Well, I don't know if that is.
Part of the debate that you can have that I know we've done on here as well is there were so many things going on in the second half of that season during the collapse. I really believe lack of communication and consistent communication, as well as the defensive coordinator change, led to all kinds of collapsing issues in that secondary that led to big plays. Bad tackles, of course, that's on the players. But I think there's a lot of things that with consistency in camp and these guys being healthy, I just expect all of that to be much better here to start the season. So yeah, there may not be a whole lot of changes, but CJ GJ back there is definitely, in my opinion, an improvement and an upgrade. And he's got familiarity here. The guys already have kind of been familiar with him from when he was here before. And then you add in these younger. I like the mix of guys with veteran experience.
I love Ringo. I probably told you I think he's a great prospect. I really do. And he's kind of forgotten now because you draft.
I know.
Yeah.
And you got Isaiah Rodgers. You've got Avonte Maddox. I mean, this secondary is really deep. There's these guys looking around here that are very talented that may not make the final roster. It's crazy.
Yeah, John pointed that out. The Eagles are going to cut somebody from the defensive back that's going to be starting or contributing on an NFL roster in the league. But I think
not starting, but contributing.
I think an interesting point you brought up, Scott, about the communication on defense. Vic Fangio relies a lot on that in his defense. I wonder how much of a hurdle that's going to be for the young guys, and that's maybe an advantage to keeping a guy like Bradberry around for a longer period of time to help acclimate the young guys who are learning the defense, learning the playbook, learning all those things. And then you get in games and you have to communicate it to everybody. That's a hard part of it.
Well, we all, I think, as reporters too, sometimes get caught up in asking these guys that are young, but it's really a good point, is about the speed of the game, adjusting to the speed of the game. And you'll hear some players talk about they've got to stop thinking out there. They just have to react and trust what they see. That's the biggest challenge for all these young guys, is to just to learn what Vic Fangio is trying to teach them, understand the communication terminology, and then react, not think once the ball is snapped. And that's the biggest thing I think these young guys have to get through, which training camp is going to be perfect for, and the mini camps in the summer. And it's already begun with the rookie mini camps. I'm sure that's all already being ingrained in these guys to get through and be ready to go. Communication, obviously, I just feel like, and we talked about this too, John, again, it's just, I don't feel like these guys trusted where somebody was going to be behind them.
No.
And especially in that zone coverage, they didn't seem to understand where one zone ended and another began. And it just led to getting picked apart.
But that's going to continue, Scott. That's my biggest concern with young cornerbacks in this particular defense, because you saw it in the Super Bowl. I mean, when there's blown coverages in big spots, people lost their minds, and Slay goes from 6-time Pro Bowl cornerback to he's garbage. And, the minute Quinyon Mitchell, it might not even be his fault, but you know how it works. And if he's chasing a wide receiver wide open because maybe the safety blew the coverage, all of a sudden it becomes a narrative that Quinyon Mitchell got cooked and he's not ready. In this football passionate town, I know the Eagles can't worry about stuff like that, but do you worry about stuff like that? Because you got to have confidence to play cornerback in the NFL.
Yeah, you do. I don't think I worry too much about that, but it is part of it. And you're right. I mean, the person who gets blamed is the guy who's closest in coverage, and it may not be his. And many times it's not his fault,
especially in this defense.
Exactly.
Yeah. And it's a great point. And that's where I think, some of the veterans have to be there for those younger guys when things like that happen. And it's one of the things every player has to learn when they come to this city and you play in this town, is you got to be able to learn to block out the noise. And it's easier for some guys. It's harder for others. Veterans still struggle with that. I mean, we look at AJ Brown. He's deleting social media. He's back on. He's off. He's on. He's, it's a tough thing for these players this day and age to have to navigate. And for a young kid, 21 years, 22 years old, suddenly thrust into this kind of spotlight in this town where the expectations are through the roof coming into this season. I mean, yeah, that could be an issue. It can be. It's just a matter of knowing. And, I think the thing is that these guys have to know it wasn't your fault, and if you know that and you believe it, then you can block out some of that criticism and noise that comes from outside the building. I think they do have a good support system, the culture there in the NovaCare complex to be able to help these guys through that.
Scott, let's stay on the defensive side of the ball, but I want to go to the linebacker position. They draft Jeremiah Trotter Jr., still haven't addressed the position other than that much. They got Oren Burks. They have a couple, they have Zach Bond. But what do you think of the linebacker position? Will they do more there? Howie always says, look, talent acquisition season isn't over after the draft. Maybe they'll make a move there, but they haven't bolstered the position much. What do you think of the linebacker position?
Yeah, well, it's every year, right? This is what we say. It's linebacker. It's linebacker. Yeah. It's, hey, what's the linebacker? Hey. So to me, it screams Howie watching the waiver wires as they go through camp and looking for guys that maybe don't fit or make a team that he brings in. I wouldn't expect a lot of changes this summer to that position, but once you get into training camp and once you start making some cuts, I fully expect him to be looking to see if there's a diamond in the rough or a guy who gets let go somewhere that they can add here at that position. But, overall on defense, I'm not sure how you guys feel. I feel like that they are taking the approach of, as a team, we are going to outscore our opponents, and that is how we are going to win games. We have built up this offense to be elite. With Kellen Moore running it, they're expecting all kinds of points. And I think they're looking at this defense going, we don't need you to pitch shutouts. We don't even need you to hold an opponent to 10. But if you can hold them to 20 or less, we're going to win every game. And so I just see the approach on defense here. You're expecting a lot out of Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter. You're expecting a lot out of some of these edge rushers here that you've got. You're expecting Nolan Smith to make a big step forward here in the second year. And I think these are a lot of places where you have to stop and say, wait a minute, are these guys going to live up to the expectations that I think this organization is setting for them? And that's going to be a big key on that defense.
Yeah, but I think the expectations are much lower on defense. So like I've said pretty consistently that I think the Eagles are going to be a top half of the NFL defense, 15, 16, somewhere in that range, which is a tremendous upgrade over last season. And I think because Vic's going to teach it better and guys are going to be in better spots. And I said the same thing about Brian Flores coming in last year with less talent, and he ended up 13th. I think the same thing is going to happen here with Vic Fangio. It's just going to be better. It's not going to be great, but it's going to be better. Offensively, it's a whole different world, Scott, as you mentioned. This offense, they got to be great. Mm-hmm. They were number 8 in the NFL last season. Everybody thinks they stunk. It was terrible. It was awful. That is the expectation Kellen Moore is walking into. You got the best offense in football. You got A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, still a top 5 offensive line. Now you got Saquon Barkley, generational talent. If I hear that, I'm going to shoot myself in the head. What is not – they can't even have hiccups. This has got to be great. Is that possible?
Yeah, that's where you talked about expectations and stuff and criticism of young players and stuff like. What about the offense? If the offense comes out in week 1 down there in Brazil and only manages like 10 points, forget it. I mean, this place is going to lose it. Yeah, I mean, you talk about. I think the pressure is squarely on the offense. Pressure is squarely on Kellen Moore.
And Jalen Hurts.
It is on Jalen Hurts. It's on Saquon. It's on all of them, really. And and lost in the shuffle is Dallas Goedert. But okay, one thing that they haven't really addressed, backup tight end. We all know Dallas Goedert can get banged up, does tend to get banged up and miss a game or 2 or 3. What are you doing at that? Because that is a big position. I think in this offense, in a place where Dallas Goedert to me could end up having a big year. If you've got to cover all these other guys, he's the one guy I think you could end up finding, a lot, open routinely over the middle of the field. But yeah, I mean, this offense is certainly going out there. Everybody's looking at it. Well, everybody looked at the Niners. You got Christian McCaffrey and all that. And now all we hear, and I think rightfully so, you look at it and this offense should be explosive. And the question is, will they? And how will Kellen Moore use these guys? It's one of the things I'm most looking forward to seeing in these first few games is trying to get that philosophy and what he's trying to accomplish week in and week out with the talent he's got. There it should be a lot of fun to watch. It should be fun to watch, but you always have that caveat.
And by the way, don't get me wrong. I don't think there's any way the Eagles can have a bad offense, but if they have a top 10 offense that's 8 or 9 or 10,
I would say that's a disappointment.
That's not acceptable. That's not
and that's where it gets tricky because it's a lot easier to improve a defense from 30th to 20th and show growth than improve an 8th ranked offense to try and crack the top 5. And you got offenses like the Niners, the Chiefs, the Bengals, like teams that are, high powered. So there's a lot of pressure on the offense and it's a harder climb for them, even with the addition of Saquon Barkley. And I think it's being underrated that we lost Jason Kelsey. How much bigger of a role than is there that more than meets the eye than what Kelsey was doing for that offense, calling out blitzes, managing the offensive line, stuff like that. I can't help but think about that as well.
Well, it's certainly something you have to keep an eye on and see how this line evolves with Kelsey not part of it. And I've brought this up. I'm really curious to see just how big of a factor Kelsey was on the tush push. Because I really think he set the tone under that pile to clear a little bit of a path for somebody to go a half a yard, right? And so that'll be curious to see as well. And if that's, how involved that is in this offense and what they try to do. But there's no doubt that offensive line is certainly the key to getting everything started. If Jalen doesn't have time to throw, and we've seen it in the past, if he doesn't trust that line or the blocking, those eyes are not staying downfield and everything starts to fall apart. He was taught, they kept saying about how they would teach him pretty much to look at one half of the field. Well, you can't ignore the other half of the field if there's a guy wide open over there. And we saw on a lot of, all 22 replays and stuff that there were guys that just weren't seen. And I think some of that was a combination of not trusting the blocking in front of him, or that the running back would pick up the blitz coming to know that he could stand in an extra second and throw that ball. Those are all things that Jalen has to develop more. But I will say a difference this.
Oh, Scott froze up for a second. And he's in the car. That's understandable. To his point about
I think he'll be back if I give him a second.
To his point about the progressions, I know that's frustrating. That's part of the modern game. I'm going to defend Jalen Hurts because you get some Yahoo. I mean that the progression is the progression on a certain play call, and it might be on the right side, and it might go high, low, whatever. And then you come over to the third progression. You might not even get to that. He might be off it at some point. And then somebody will take a screenshot from the other side of the field.
Yeah, right.
So-and-so will be wide open. But by the way, the defense understands by that point where the progression is, and they're moving away because they understand it's going to be a while before he gets back to this. That could factor into it as well. So that kind of stuff. He's not an owl. Yeah. You can't turn your head around and immediately look to the other side of the field when the progression is where the progression is. And that's every quarterback, not just Jalen Hurts. So I think that part's overrated. I think with Jalen, we don't talk a lot about Jalen because there's so many other issues. And I think people now understand he's a good quarterback. It's just a matter of how good. And you want to get him back to that 2022 level. And we'll see if that happens. I think a lot of it is just clean up the turnover issues. I don't see much difference between 2022 and 2023 other than the turnovers, to be honest.
Let's get Scott Grayson back in here. I think he's joined us back. Let me give him a second. Nope.
So, yeah, we'll see. But
I agree, but I do think there is some things that Jalen can improve upon.
Oh, well, everybody can.
Yeah, I'm sure. I know that. But I mean, there you see a lot of needs to read the blitzes better, stuff like that. And I do think that comes with time, and that comes with being a veteran in the league. But when you're getting paid the kind of money you're getting paid, you're going to be expected to do all those things.
Oh, sure.
And how much will that change, John, without Kelsey? I mean, you lose a guy like Kelsey that's seen.
And I'll tell you where the tush push. I'll tell you, Kelsey used to steal a half yard.
Yeah,
and he would get away with.
Do you think the tush push is gone this year?
No, well, not at the start. If they're not effective,
I'm not talking about from a rule standpoint. I'm talking about from the Eagles' ability to be.
No, I know. If they're ineffective, they'll shelve it. If they're effective, they'll keep using it. That the one part about Kelsey, he really did get deference because of his veteran stature and his reputation that they will no longer have. And there's no more fudging with the football to get that extra 18 inches.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's going to be but the far bigger aspect, because I've always said the tush push to me, and we can bring Scott. I think Scott, the tush push to me is the most overrated thing in football, because the Eagles were phenomenal on sneaks with Carson Wentz and Jalen Hurts, traditional quarterback sneaks. They were great at it anyway. So it just became a thing. And I think it F with other people's mentality more than anything else. They were going to be, in fact, I argued, Scott probably argued with you. Welcome back. I argued they should ban it because the Eagles are going to be successful anyway. So what do they care? And let these other teams worry about it. But where I changed is those other teams weren't successful running the tush push. They were like a disaster doing it. So, it worked out for the Eagles either way. But they were great. You remember, Scott, quarterback sneaks with Carson Wentz. They were unbelievable.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, that goes back to the point of, so was it Wentz or was it Kelsey? And, you got to, all the success you're talking about, there's one consistent variable there, and that is Jason Kelsey, and
Yeah.
he was off the line. He found a way to take his smaller stature, right? He was always said as to be undersized and all this stuff. He was lower to the ground, and so much of blocking and all that stuff is center of gravity and leverage. Yeah, and he found a way to use it to his advantage. And the Eagles were able to take advantage of that too, like you said, with Carson Wentz. Wentz did it more with his length, being able to reach across. Jalen Hurts, obviously, with his legs and his strength to drive, I think is part of the success as well. So, I agree with you, John, and you're right about the one thing where other teams weren't able to be successful doing it. I think that's the sole reason, if you listen to Troy Vincent talk, why they left it in the game, because other teams weren't able to repeat it.
I remember who was the guy, the little receiver? They're using I forget. They're using this tiny it was Brandon Powell. They're using, he's like 185 pounds to push for the. I'm like, what? You got to have somebody like, Dallas Goedert, or this year it would be Saquon Barkley and his 9 million squat Saquad. You don't use 185 pounds. So that's like Devontae Smith doing the tush push.
Right.
Yeah. These teams are nuts. But anyway, we got on a
I just want to say, you know what? All these guys who want to sound like geniuses, right? Or seem like it. I want to see some sort of a variation off of it, that like a pass play off of it.
Well, the Eagles have done that on occasion.
Not a lot, but yes.
Not a lot. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But there's definitely things that you can do to evolve that play. To just be able to get out on the perimeter. I mean, or force teams to have to leave a couple guys out there.
Yeah, right. Force teams to not be able to just stack the box and crush it.
Right.
Yeah.
Or grab Jalen by the face mask.
Yeah.
But Jalen, that's when you froze up a little bit. That's where we're talking about Jalen and getting back to his level of 2022 versus 2023. In a lot of ways, this is simplifying, but I really think it just comes down to they took care of the football better in 2022. I think if you take away the turnovers, they were third in offense in 2022. They were eighth last year. They probably go from eighth to about third if you take away those turnovers. I don't think there was much difference. I really don't.
No, I agree with you.
Yeah.
The turnovers really were the problem last year, so much. And where they occurred on the field was a problem as well. I mean, a lot of times they gave an opponent a short field, or they took points off the board for themselves because they were driving. And you can't have that. That's one of and we see it in the auditorium, right? It's at the top about, takeaways and protecting the football. And they did not do that well last year, either way.
And they do need, and at Grayson Fox 29, make sure you follow Scott on Twitter. Thank you for stopping your errands for us this morning. But I do think the one thing the Eagles really need to work on, and the reason Kellen Moore is here, they got too caught up in the big play mentality. I think Kansas City went through this with the shift from Tyreek Hill to non-Tyreek Hill. They didn't have that explosive nature. And if you remember, Patrick Mahomes, he got a little frustrated at times trying to push the football down the field. And then he adjusted, and the rest is history, obviously. But I think the Eagles need that adjustment. It can't always be just go for the big play.
Yeah, Tom Brady's got 7 Super Bowls. He took a lot of what the defense gave him.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah,
and yards after the catch. Those kind of shorter passes that go for longer yardage because guys are able to add to it. AJ Brown can do the yak, and
he's one of the best in the league at the yak. Yep.
Right, yeah. And Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert usually. One of the things with Zach Ertz was he would go down pretty quickly after the catch. Dallas Goedert can add on some yards after the catch. So I think you're right. I mean, it would be shorter completions is not a bad thing. It can go for big plays still.
Yep, I agree. Scott Grayson, thanks for joining us. Make sure you read all Scott Grayson's work. Follow him on Fox 29 and follow him on his Twitter at @SGraysonFox29. Scott, thanks for joining the show, man.
No problem. Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah,
thanks, bud.
And Scotty Grayson, good stuff from Scott Grayson as always. Me and John will come back. We'll put a bow on the show. I want to give a programming update to all of our viewers in the chat box. There will be no National Football Show today. Dan is picking up his daughter from college. He graduated college. So Dan picking up his daughter. There will be no National Football Show today. So for those of you who are waiting for Dan's show later in the day, he will not be back. He will not be on today. He will be back tomorrow. Me and John will come back. We'll put a bow on Birds 365. We'll wrap up this Tuesday, May 7th edition. Already May, Johnny Mac. It feels like the season just ended. It's May.
Yeah, man. The NFL's good with the calendar. I say it all the time.
So we'll come back. We'll put a wrap on this show. We'll kick around one thing that Ed Kracz said that really stuck out to me. I'll kick that off, John, see what he thinks. And we'll close up this Tuesday edition of Birds 365.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.
Field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
Champions on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
Heading down the shore. Have a ball once more.
Here, imaginations run wild and time stands still. Because here, you can find the best of the Jersey Shore, all on one 5-mile island. So leave the old you behind and get lost in the woods.
Wild, wild, wildwood days.
Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
Hi, I'm Jim Muehlbronner, Managing Partner at DelVal Insurance Group. Give us a call. We're a local, knowledgeable agency, not an 800 number. Go Birds!
The greatest fans on earth. It's a bold statement, but would you expect anything less from Philadelphia? 58 years of heartache creates a toughness, a grit, a resolve not found in most. Sure, our prayers were answered, but now that we've had a taste, we're looking for more. Pondley Hockey, official partner of the Philadelphia Eagles.
EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome back in, everybody. Tuesday edition of Birds 365. Putting our final touches on this Tuesday edition. Off season's flying by. Drafts in the rearview mirror. Johnny Mac, before we get out of here, there's one thing I want to ask you about that Ed Kracz said that I was quite surprised by. He was comfortable with the depth at the linebacker position.
Oh, yeah.
I was surprised to hear that from Ed.
Ed and I are good friends, but we don't agree on everything. I do not like the linebacker situation. And there are a stunning amount of people to me that are okay with it, Ed being one of them. But there's a lot more than Ed, and it all has to do with Devin White. And it all has to do with him being the number 5 overall pick 5 years ago or whatever it was. I used to say it all the time with Jody. This league moves quickly. All right. That has no relevance to what Devin White is today. And if he was the 5th overall pick in the draft, and he played like the 5th overall pick in the draft, he wouldn't be signing a 1-year deal for $3.5 million. And that's what he signed, not that $7.5 million nonsense. And even that, by the way, is more than I thought he would have gotten. I thought he'd be closer to the veteran minimum. That ain't good. That ain't good. So everybody putting him in as a foundational piece and the motivational aspect, guess what? He knew he was on a contract year with Tampa Bay last year, and he shit the bed to the point he got benched and got a 1-year contract for $3.5 million. So why is this year different than last year?
He was making pretty good money because he got that 5th-year option picked up.
He was making great money.
Yeah,
but
which boggles my mind a little bit why they picked that option up. But
yeah, he was making great money, but he knew that was it unless he played well, and he didn't play well. So same motivation. He just had a better contract last year. Now he's got a bad contract with the same motivation. Maybe he just can't play. I always say Occam's razor. That means the simplest explanation is usually the right one. Maybe he just can't play that well.
Yeah, I'm gonna side with Johnny Mack on this one. I cannot see what Ed Kracz is seeing with this linebacker room. I just don't think it's good. I mean, I love the story of Jeremiah Trotter Jr., but as we've talked about all day today, he's a 5th-round pick, and I don't know how good he's going to be. Nobody knows how good he's going to be. He might not be good at all for all we know. So we'll see. I'm waiting for Howie to pull the zig and the zig instead of the zag at the linebacker position.
I think it's too late for that. There's always the trade market. I do think.
Yeah, I mean, look, we have gotten some key guys later in the offseason and in recent years. We got James Bradberry super late, and before last year, Eagles fans liked him. He had a good year the year we went to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Steven Nelson the year before that was a late pickup. I think even CJ was
2 days. He was 2 days before camp started. Steven Nelson.
Yeah.
CJ was trade pickup at the 53-man deadline. He was so late. So there's always the trade market. And maybe they can go that route. But I think we're going to very similar to what happened last year. The Eagles got to camp and quickly ascertained over the first couple of weeks that wasn't good enough. And all of a sudden, Zach Cunningham and Miles Jack were here. And Zach worked out to a certain degree. Miles did not. And then they picked up Shaq Leonard even later in the season. That didn't work out. They're going to be adding that linebacker because they're just not good enough. Yeah. And they will see it once training camp starts. But you really got to hope that Kobe Dean can stay healthy. I mean, you really got to hope he can play 17 games.
Yeah, my problem with Dean is even if he stays healthy, I don't profess to know everything about the linebacker position or what makes a great NFL linebacker, but the eye test tells me that Kobe Dean is not going to be a great NFL linebacker. I hope I'm wrong. But from what I've seen of him, he doesn't look.
Well, I'll say this. I have more confidence in Kobe Dean than Devin White. I will say that. If he's out there playing, my concerns with Nakobe have to do with durability and that kind of thing.
Yeah. Which is a big part of this, though. I mean, the best of it, the best ability is availability. That's what they say.
Yeah, and that's a big part of it. But as a player, just as a player when he's out there, he's smart. He knows what he's doing. I've some concerns about his size and things like that. But he's not going to be out of position. He's not going to be doing things he's not supposed to do. I don't think he's going to be Roquan Smith either, from a talent perspective. But I think he'll do his job. He'll Bill Belichick it. He will do his job. I'm not confident in that with Devin White.
We'll wrap up this Tuesday edition of Birds 365, and I'll end it on one note. Time to step up, Georgia boys. I tell you what, everybody was loving these Georgia picks. They got to pan out these next few years for it to work, or else everybody's going to be they're going to go from the Philly dogs to everybody in Philly hates the dogs. So we'll see how it all plays out. Johnny Mac and I will come back tomorrow for Wednesday's edition of Birds 365. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Don't forget to hit the like button on your way out. Looks like we did crack the 100 likes, 110. So we appreciate you all for tuning in. Thanks, Johnny Mac, for a good show today. Thanks to our guest, Ed Kracz, in Hour 1, and Scott Grayson in Hour 2. Thank you all for watching, and we will see you tomorrow. Thanks, Johnny Mac.
You've been listening to Birds 365, the destination for the passionate Eagles football fan who bleeds green. If it's Eagles football, we're talking about it. Debate inside the locker room and guests that are some of the greatest football minds from around the region. We hope you enjoyed the show. We know we had a blast. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hook up with us on social media at JAKIB Sports. See you next time on Birds 365.